at a time when my family and I are under 24-hour armed guard by over a dozen government agents of the Naval Investigative Service because of fear that terrorists will seek revenge for my official acts and carry out their announced intentions to kill me. It is also difficult to comprehend that my work at the NSC, all of which was approved and carried out in the best interests of our country, has led to two massive parallel investigations staffed by over 200 people. It is mind-boggling to me that one of those investigations is criminal and that some here have attempted to criminalize policy differences between co-equal branches of government and the executive's conduct of foreign affairs. I believe it is inevitable that the Congress will in the end blame the executive branch. But I suggest to you that it is the Congress which must accept at least some of the blame in the Nicaraguan freedom fighters matter. Plain and simple, the Congress is to blame because of the fickle, vacillating, unpredictable, on-again, off-again policy toward the Nicaraguan democratic resistance, the so-called Contras. I do not believe that the support of the Nicaraguan freedom fighters can be treated as the passage of a budget. I suppose if the budget doesn't get passed on time again this year, there will be inevitably another extension of a month or two. But the Contras, the Nicaraguan freedom fighters, are people, living, breathing young men and women who have had to suffer a desperate struggle for liberty with sporadic and confusing support from the United States of America. Armies need food and consistent help. They need a flow of money, of arms, clothing, and medical supplies. The Congress of the United States allowed the executive to encourage them to do battle and then abandon them. The Congress of the United States left soldiers in the field unsupported and vulnerable to their communist enemies. When the executive branch did everything possible within the law to prevent them from being wiped out by Moscow's surrogates in Havana and Managua, you then had this investigation to blame the problem on the executive branch. It does not make sense to me. In my opinion, these hearings have caused serious damage to our national interests. Our adversaries laugh at us, and our friends recoil in horror. I suppose it would be one thing if the intelligence committees wanted to hear all of this in private and thereafter pass laws which, in the view of Congress, make for better policies or better functioning of government, but to hold them publicly for the whole world to see strikes me as very harmful. Not only does it embarrass our friends and allies with whom we have worked, many of whom have helped us in various programs, but it must also make them very wary of helping us again. I believe that these hearings, perhaps unintentionally so, have revealed matters of great secrecy in the operation of our government, and sources and methods of intelligence activities have clearly been revealed to the detriment of our security. As a result of rumor and speculation and innuendo, I have been accused of almost every crime imaginable. Wild rumors have abounded. Some media reports have suggested that I was guilty of espionage for the way I handled U.S. intelligence. Some have said I was guilty of treason and suggested in front of my 11-year-old daughter that I should be given the death penalty. Some said I stole $10 million. Some said I was second only in power to the President of the United States, and others that I condoned drug trafficking to generate funds for the Contras, or that I personally ordered assassinations, or that I was conducting my own foreign policy. It has even been suggested that I was the personal confidant of the President of the United States. These and many other stories are patently untrue. I don't mind telling you that I'm angry at what some have attempted to do to me and my family. I believe that these committee hearings will show that you have struck some blows. But I am going to walk from here with my head high and my shoulders straight because I am proud of what we accomplished. I am proud of the efforts that we made, and I am proud of the fight that we fought. I am proud of serving in the administration of a great president. I am not ashamed of anything in my professional or personal conduct, as we go through this process, I ask that you continue to please keep an open mind. Please be open-minded and able to admit that perhaps your preliminary conclusions about me were wrong. And please also, do not mistake my attitude for lack of respect. I am in awe of this great institution, just as I am in awe of the presidency. Both are equal branches of government with separate areas of responsibility under the Constitution that I have taken an oath to support and defend, and I have done so, as many of you have. And although I do not agree with what you are doing or the way that it is being done, I do understand your interest in obtaining the facts, and I have taken an oath to tell the truth in helping you to do so. In closing, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for this opportunity, I would just simply like to thank the tens of thousands of Americans who have communicated their support, encouragement, and prayers for me and my family in this difficult time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Colonel North. I wish the record to show that the panel did not amend, delete, or strike out any word or words or phrases from this opening statement. Furthermore, we did not put on testimony words which we thought were helpful to our goals and leave the rest out. I'm certain you'll agree with me, Colonel, that every word you wanted to present to the people of the United States was presented. Isn't that correct, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it was, and I was not referring to my testimony, but that which preceded me, sir, about me.
Secondly, you have suggested that these hearings have disclosed matters of great secrecy in the operation of our government, and sources and methods of intelligence activities have clearly been revealed to the detriment of our national security. May I once again advise you that according to the Director of the National Security Agency, General Odom, not a single bit of classified material has been leaked by activities of this joint panel. Questioning will be resumed by Mr. Van Cleve. Mr. Van Cleve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Colonel North.
Good morning, Counsel.
Good morning, Mr. Sullivan.
Good morning, sir.
Colonel North, in your opening statement, which you just gave, you testified that you graduated from the Naval Academy in 1968. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And in 1969, did you serve on active combat duty in the Armed Forces of the United States in the Republic of Vietnam?
69, yes, correct.
And is it the case that during your service there, you were awarded a series of military citations, including 2 Purple Hearts, the Bronze Star, and the Silver Star?
I was.
And the Silver Star was awarded for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in battle, is that correct?
I believe that's the way the citation reads.
Colonel North, Robert McFarland has suggested that your Vietnam experience affected your view of the Contras and their situation in Nicaragua. Is Mr. McFarland correct about that?
Counsel, I don't believe that anyone who served in Vietnam, who saw what happened as a consequence of our efforts, when in my opinion we won all the battles and then lost the war, could ever be unaffected by that unless they were totally insensitive. I would also point out that we didn't lose the war in Vietnam. We lost the war right here in this city.
Can you tell the committee, in your opinion, sir, what are the similarities between the war in Nicaragua and the war in Vietnam?
Well, the similarities are only in terms of what I would call the geostrategic similarities, in that we had invested, rightly or wrongly, and I believe correctly, American credibility in support of democracy in South Vietnam. And the abandonment of South Vietnam in the latter days of 1974 and culminating in the disaster that followed shortly thereafter, created just exactly what people said it would, the so-called domino effect of the collapse of Vietnam, the butchery of Cambodia, the communization of Laos, and a threat to that part of the world. And aside from the devastation for tens of thousands of people, the deaths of hundreds of thousands, millions in Cambodia, the only other similarity comes when you invest that same kind of credibility of this nation in the support of a democratic outcome in Central America, and then begin to walk away from it. It is my belief that what I saw in Vietnam, where I saw the army of South Vietnam, and I saw the Vietnamese Marines, one of whom was my roommate as I went through basic school at Quantico, and who gave their lives for their country. The parallels to see that in the campesinos, the young men and women of the Nicaraguan resistance, is extraordinarily profound. Yesterday, the Attorney General of the United States authorized 200,000 Nicaraguans to remain in this country as refugees from oppression. That is but a small fraction of the refugees who have already fled Nicaragua. If historical precedent is an example, when a communist takeover occurs, between 10 and 25% of the population will flee that country and go to the next nearest democracy. And if that happens throughout Central America, from the Rio Grande to the Panama Canal, you're talking about something in the vicinity of 10 million human beings. Already 10% of the population of Nicaragua has fled. And so when I said yesterday that the Contra, the Nicaraguan democratic resistance, the young men and women who fight today in the fields of Nicaragua, were not a product of Ollie North or Director Casey or even this government. They are a product. They were raised up as an army of opposition by the Sandinistas themselves. And what I see is a very distinct parallel in terms of the way the rest of the world sees our commitment. I believe that that's the way the President saw it. That what we have happening, not as a parallel experience to Vietnam where our commitment increases to the point where we have the commitment of American ground forces, but the fact is we have made a commitment to a democratic outcome in Central America. And a majority of both houses have consistently reported that that's what they want. There have been differences as to how that should be achieved. But once we made the commitment to support the democratic resistance, we should have made that commitment a consistent one. And as soon as we begin to back away, the rest of the world looked at us and wondered if we had lost heart. We cannot be seen, I believe, in the world today as walking away and leaving failure in our wake. We must be able to demonstrate, not only in Nicaragua, but in Afghanistan and Angola and elsewhere, where freedom fighters have been told, we will support you. We must be able to continue to do so. If we do not, we will be overwhelmed. Ultimately, we will be forced to commit American ground combat troops. This nation cannot abide the communization of Central America. We cannot have Soviet bases on the mainland of this hemisphere. And what I worked very hard to achieve was an outcome of democracy in Central America without the use of U.S. military force. There are certainly members of this body and perhaps the rest of the Congress who would feel that we should have used military force, American military force. My effort, and I believe what the President has said on it, is that the worst outcome we could have would be the consolidation of a communist client state in Nicaragua and the spread of communism throughout the region. The second worst outcome would be to have to use American forces, Marines like me and the sons of perhaps many of the members of this committee, my son. And we ought not to have to do that. We will, if it comes to that, I'm convinced. But there is an alternative, and the alternative is backing the democratic resistance in Nicaragua, a consistent program of support for democracy in El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Costa Rica.
All right, sir, I need to ask you the other side of the question. What, in your view, are the differences between the war in Vietnam and the war in Nicaragua?
10,000 miles to start with. And you're talking about a war that is 400 and some odd miles from our borders. You're talking about the efforts of the Soviet Union, not on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, but right here in this hemisphere. Hours. I mean, I have flown to Nicaragua in 4.5 hours. I mean, you're not talking about a day's trip like it used to be to go to Vietnam. We are talking about something right next door. That's the major difference.
I think you've already said this, but I want the record to be clear on it. Would you agree that the United States finally withdrew from Vietnam because the war effort lost the support of the American people? Isn't that correct, Colonel North?
It did.
Now, as you've said in prior testimony, in October 1984, Congress adopted an amendment that is commonly referred to as the Boland Amendment, one of a series of amendments, but it's generally agreed that the October 1984 amendment was the most restrictive form of that amendment. And I give you the date of the amendment to sort of help you place things in time, because I want to ask you a series of questions about the Soviet military position and the Soviet investment in Nicaragua as of the time when the United States decided to cut off funds to the resistance. And if you would please turn to Exhibit 212, which I believe your counsel will find in what we refer to colloquially as the big books. These are not the subject matter books, but the large exhibit books. And it's my earnest hope that you have been provided with a copy of Exhibit 212.
At this point, to advise all of you that we will have a series of votes in the United States Senate, the first at 9:30, the second at 10, and the third at 10:30. This will account for the absence of members of the Senate during this period. Please proceed.